Hi there friends and welcome to my new Tainted Grail tutorial. I'm Icon and today we're going to talk about the Sentinel character class. I'm going to introduce the basic gameplay of this class, pros and cons, what I personally think you should keep an eye out when you're drafting cards and perks, and of course we're also going to talk about the equipment again. So let's cover up the skills of the Sentinel first. The Sentinel's ultimate is very straightforward. You deal hits to random enemies, and each ultimate charge equals 1 hit. When we play arrow cards or spirit arrow cards, we gain charges, and, well, the more charges we have, the more damage per hit. Very straightforward, and it also emphasizes quite well what the Sentinel's specialization is in general. While the Apostate is all about fancy versatility and flipping cards, and the Zealot's specialties are more about the avoidance of damage and dishing out singular, powerful hits. The Sentinel is a friggin' Gatling gun compared to that. It only gets more into this direction when we check out the passive, the Phantom. So whenever I play an arrow, my Phantom will attack the same target, dealing an additional hit for 50% of the damage. So we don't attack once, we attack twice whenever we play an arrow card. Of course, the Sentinel also uses the agile movement skill, so my barriers are lasting only 1 turn, unlike all other classes. And if we ever gain negative armor at the start of a turn with negative armor, we gain barrier equal to 50% of that negative armor. This can be really, really useful at times. So, card-wise, our deck consists out of a lot of shot cards, smoke shot card, that's just very basic. Every single of the archer classes runs around like this. But here, things look a little bit differently. The specialty of the Sentinel is the release card, multi-shot random enemies for 25% damage. The multi-shot mechanic is pretty present in the Sentinel's build, and it's quite simple. We use up all our arrow cards on the hand, and they get modified, and then they get played according to the card. So here, release would pick up all our remaining arrow cards on the hand, enhance their damage by 25%, and spread them then across random enemies. The flipped version of that is Arrow Storm, which does exactly the same, but even for more damage. Our quiver features the other special card, and that's the Phantom's Aid. We have that on our hand every turn. This is the one card the Sentinel starts his turn with, and it creates a Shadow Shot card. Shadow Shot is a regular attack, which reduces the target's armor by 10 until the end of combat. This is a wonderful thing. It softens up the enemy, and it's a very versatile thing, which helps you a ton to gain the upper hand. So let's get outside and put that build a little bit to the test. So overall, I find the Sentinel is the most easily accessible class of the archer classes, but at the same time, I felt like I had the most trouble surviving and finishing the game with this guy, because I got so enthralled in the pew-pew mechanisms there that it's really easy to lose track of that. Okay, but let's get started. This guy is only a shooting practice. We're playing at difficulty number 5, so this is not the easiest, but also not the hardest. Your standard procedure, if you want to just whack down an enemy easy, is to create, at the beginning of the turn, your Phantom's Aid. If you can afford it energy-wise, always open up with a Shadow Shot, because it shreds down the target's armor, which is good, making every subsequent attack stronger. As you see here, shot by shot by shot, we get stronger, this thing goes down, and now we could either release our charges from the ultimate or create another arrow back thingy, shoot one more time, and now let's release the remaining arrows and win in 1 turn. Keep in mind, the Sentinel can release his charges whenever he wants. He does not have a certain minimum threshold to respect there. You can always release your charges. But the problem is, the ultimate is always on random targets. So you need to either minimize the amount of targets to 1 if you want to burst 1 target, or use other ways of marking enemies. So we have our first cards, and the Ambition card is one of my favorites to showcase there. Gaining armor and damage for 2 turns, and the flip side is stripping away armor and damage from the enemies. These cards, well, they are useful for all the archer classes. Since your barrier gain is directly connected to the armor amount on your character class, the more armor you have, the more barrier you gain from your defensive cards, and that's just awesome. Also, abilities which debuff the enemy's damage are really, really awesome, because the Sentinel has a quite low HP pool, therefore armor is not only increasing your barriers, but also reducing the amount of damage you have to soak up per strike. So no wonder that I would say the increase of armor is absolutely mandatory. And on the other side here, I want to showcase the Ancestral Domination here too. The enemy's damage reduction is also very, very powerful. If you can't get that as a perk, really tasty. But nothing beats armor. My personal preferences among perks are armor first, then damage, and then other nice utilities, like, for example, debuffing enemies. But armor first. Whatever increases your armor is really, really powerful. But since the Sentinel also features such a high amount of attacks, every card or every perk which is capable of increasing your damage by percent is insanely powerful. Because I must say, no other ranged character class from 3 is featuring such an insane amount of attacks and such a high damage potential compared in such a short amount of time. Like, the other classes more like focus their damage in more singular actions. The Sentinel is just all over the place and shooting like crazy. So this is one of the more dangerous situations where we have tons of enemies and it's hard to tackle down single targets. I wanted to have a fight like that because it's really cool to showcase that. Here we start out with a card which reduces the damage of all enemies by a crazy amount. Super helpful, but let's just pretend this was not around. I'll play the Ambition card first, pumping up my armor by a tremendous amount, and you see immediately the amount of damage here reduces. Now we're playing down some feints, and with that combo I instantly gained 45 barrier, and now you see that's way more than we need. I don't even need to play the Tainted Force at this point. I can rather transform it into its new stage. And now we just go for what I said, using the Shadow Shot first, and then targeting out your enemies. Always try to target out enemies that grow first, because you are not really good at growing yourself. The Sentinel is a character class which basically has only one scaling mechanic, and that's your ultimate. Beyond that, your damage is always pretty much the same, unless you play cards for that. Other character classes, like, for example, the Zealot, buffs up his damage whenever he does nothing. So that's not a bonus you can have with the Sentinel. Therefore, every enemy which scales for himself is dangerous for you. So, like I said, pump up your damage as much as possible, because it also empowers your Phantom by a crazy amount. So, here we go. One shot, and another shot. Keeping the Phantom for another enemy, because I didn't want to waste my Phantom's armor decrease on somebody who's going to die anyways. So now let's play feints at the end of the turn, and there we go. And that's how you basically dominate your fights. The pretty big downside of the Sentinel is, in general, he needs a lot of energy to actually deal damage. As you see here, the Phantom's Aid, which you can play every turn, costs you 1 point of energy, and a lot of these attacks like Release costs you energy, Arrow Storm costs you even 2 energy, and on top of that you need to defend yourself somehow. Because at this point, for example, good turn, we only have access to 15 points of barrier. So I personally found like that one of the biggest weaknesses of the Sentinel in general, that I always kind of like struggled to get my energy management between defending myself and attacking the enemies widespread under one hand. It's really difficult for me because, as you see here, now we're definitely going to suffer damage. We can't really take down both of these guys, and luckily we now had a stun available, so we're going to stun this dude, or this one. Well, we're going to stun that guy. And as we see here, the biggest problem for the Sentinel, in my opinion, are all these encounters where you have to fight several enemies at once. Whoops, I messed up my combo myself here. That's not how to do it. So we should have had domination first to reduce the enemy's armor. Whatever. And now let's use the ultimate and hope that it'll destroy the abomination. The other really big downside of this character class, in my humble opinion, is also the large amount of randomness in the kit. Like, there's random attacks on your ultimate, random attacks on your basic multi-shot skills. A lot of the time you will struggle to actually focus the damage of your ultimate on a single target, and that's something I consider as a big downside. The energy management and the randomness, the large randomness of your attacks can at times be very, very annoying for the Sentinel to deal with in general. But beyond that, I really, really like this character class, mostly because it's a very cool class to give you a understanding of the archer class without having too many complicated effects. And besides, it's really fun to use effects like these, as you see here. This is fun, but it wasn't effective enough to kill our enemy, and I'm taking a lot of damage at this point. I just wanted to show you how things can look like. Wait a sec, why didn't he attack? But overall, always invest your energy into your defense first to soak away the damage that comes against you, and then think about how you will take down your enemy. By the way, these perverted life force dudes are really, really annoying enemies for you because of their strong aura effect, negating small attacks in general. So, let's finish that. As you see here, not as easy as it sounds. Okay, here we go. Alright, let's draft another card. When drafting cards, I personally always try to go for enough ways to defend myself, because for the archer classes, I personally realized there's nothing worse than not being able to survive in any way. So every card that features lots of barrier, for example these ones, it's triple stage cards or double stage cards can be really good. Lots of barrier on the first step, less barrier on the next one with an attack, and lots of damage on the last one. These cards give you a lot of versatility, although the flips don't, sometimes you don't know where the flip will end. Damage wise, I can also recommend you to acquire another option to multi-shot if you grab a good one. I'm really not too happy with the Arrow Storm in general. There are better options, and of course the usual sentiment that I always go for in this game, stuns. You need stuns. At times the enemy's damage numbers are so insanely high that it will be really, really difficult to mitigate that alone with barrier. And on the other hand, there's also enemies which just demand you to stun them per se, because they have mechanics that bring you into a lot of trouble if you don't manage to stun your enemies. So with that being said, I personally think the Sentinel is a very beginner compatible character class, but also I felt like it was the one archer class for me I have the most trouble staying alive with, because it's so easy to get lost in shooting like a madman, and it's so easy to calculate these incredible amounts of small attacks wrongly. Therefore, I would actually say it's the easiest to pick up, but I think it's one of the hardest to master. So if you are new to this character class and you were struggling with damage dealing on the other archer classes, feel free to give the Sentinel a go. So we're going to talk about the equipment now next. Over at our good old friend, the blacksmith. Well, I think everybody who watched the other archer videos already can know what I'm talking about now. We're going to talk about the good old Ethel rune first. Judging from starter runes, nothing beats the Ethel rune on the archer classes. The flat armor increase is so valuable because it buffs up your barrier gain. I've been talking about that in the other videos a lot too, because basically every point of armor does not only reduce the power of the hit, it also increases the amount of barrier gain, and the synergy is really massive because the amount of barrier you lose is also reduced by the amount of armor. So the big downside of the Ethel rune is that you have to use it on your armor, because it would be awesome in your weapon too, because each card played increases your damage by 5% this turn. Basically, if you would slot your starter gear with 2 Ethel runes, you would be very, very well off. Other options, but that's the same compared to the other archer classes that I was talking before. Other options would be the Gar for the weapon slot. A flat-out damage increase by 2 is really, really good, because you have so many hits, and whenever your build is consisting of lots of small attacks, increasing your baseline damage is extremely powerful. You might also check out the Seamstress and upgrade your baseline damage there too, because there's practically nothing as powerful for somebody who's multiple hitting than just increasing your baseline damage, because that increases everything else. For the weapon slots, of course, mentioned already the Ethel, but I personally also love the cost reduction and draw additional card thingies in the first turn of combat. These can give you a lot more versatility, and of course also attractive, especially for the Sentinel, is the first turn of combat damage increase, and also the first turn of combat armor increase on the Tia rune, because all the archer classes with their squishiness suffer the most when the enemy formation is still complete and not decimated. So the first few turns of combat can be very, very volatile, and therefore buffing your base stats is awesome. Like you saw there, if you have a combo of more damage in the first turn and more cards, cheaper cards in the first turn, you can really wreak havoc upon your enemies easily with that. Beyond that, I think I already mentioned pretty much everything I wanted to mention, and to put a summary under the Zealot, I really, not the Zealot, the Sentinel, I'm sorry. I really enjoyed playing the Sentinel, but I also had a lot of trouble staying alive with the Sentinel, because it's so super easy to get lost in all those minimum and all those little shots. To play him successfully, keep your defenses in your attention first, and then attack again, and everything you can get to make your energy management more effective is extremely valuable for the Sentinel class, more than for most other classes, because you struggle so much in having enough energy to defend yourself and dish out all these multi-stage attacks, that I personally felt like that was one of the major gripes. Okay, I hope that was helpful for you guys. Feel free to drop your comments down below. If there's anything you felt like I was missing out, feel free to add that, because this is no competition. This is more like I'm happy when we have as much knowledge about this character class down here as possible. Of course, leave a thumbs up on that video too if you liked it. It makes it more visible for other people. And last but not least, if you enjoy that content, drop my channel a subscription, turn on those notifications, and you won't miss anything of my daily content. On top of that, down there, you'll find my Twitch channel where I do daily streams too. And last but not least, if you might want to show some support, check out my Coffee site or my Patreon site. I'd be more than delighted if you did so. Anyways, thanks for watching. That's the biggest support of them all. You're awesome for doing so, and I hope you're going to check out new videos as well. See you then. Bye-bye.